Adam, born of dust, breathed with life. God's perfect world. Before clocks learned how to count. Before seconds began to fall one after another. Before the universe understood what it meant to move forward. There was God. Not surrounded by emptiness. Not enclosed by darkness. Not waiting for something to exist. Because nothing has ever been absent where God is. There was no chaos demanding order, no silence begging for sound. There was only purpose resting within eternity. God did not create because he was lonely. He did not create because he lacked anything. He created because love, by its nature, overflows. And then, God spoke. The first sound to ever exist was not thunder, not wind, not the crashing of oceans. It was a voice. Calm. Absolute. Alive with intention. When God spoke, reality listened. When he commanded, existence obeyed, not out of fear, but because his words carried life itself. Let there be light. Light did not struggle into being. It did not hesitate. It erupted, pure, radiant, obedient. Light flooded what had never known division, and in that moment, the universe learned its first lesson: God brings clarity where there is no confusion, and order where there is no form. Light was separated from darkness, not because darkness was evil, but because distinction was beautiful. God named the light day and the darkness night. Time was born not as a master, but as a servant, measuring the unfolding of God's design. The heavens stretched wide at his command, an endless canvas of stars waiting to be named. Waters gathered where God told them to gather, drawing boundaries they would never cross. Dry land rose, not through violence, but through obedience. Mountains lifted their heads. Valleys bowed low. The earth took its first breath. Then God dressed the world. Grass learned how to grow. Seeds discovered how to open themselves to the soil. Trees bore fruit before anyone existed to taste it. Flowers bloomed without witnesses, beauty existing simply because God willed it so. The oceans filled with life that shimmered and danced beneath the surface. Birds learned the joy of flight. Animals roamed without fear, because fear had not yet entered creation. Everything existed in harmony. Nothing hunted for dominance. Nothing competed for survival. Life was not a struggle, it was a gift. Creation did not groan, it sang. Every part of the world knew its place, its purpose, its rhythm. And God saw everything he had made. It was good. Yet even in perfection, God was not finished. Because a perfect world still needed someone who could know it, name it, and reflect its creator. Stars could shine, oceans could roar, and trees could flourish, but none could love him freely. So God chose to create something unlike everything else. Not by speaking it into existence, but by forming it with his hands. He reached into the earth he had made, into the dust that would one day remember every human footstep. He shaped it carefully, deliberately, arms that would work, hands that would touch, a heart that would beat with awareness. The form lay still, flawless yet lifeless. Then God did something he had done for nothing else. He leaned close. And he breathed. That breath carried more than air. It carried consciousness, identity, and divine intention. Dust became flesh. Creation opened its eyes. And for the first time, a human being looked upon God, not in fear, not in confusion, but in recognition. This was Adam. The world Adam awoke into had no shadow of death. The ground welcomed his steps. The air felt like home. The animals did not flee from him, they recognized him. He was not a stranger in creation, he belonged to it, and yet he stood above it. God had made a perfect world. But more importantly, He made it for relationship. And the story of the first choice was about to begin. Before the universe learned how to expand. Before space stretched its boundaries. Before time began to move in one direction instead of resting in eternity. God was. Nothing surrounded him, yet nothing was missing. Nothing existed beside him, yet he lacked nothing. God did not exist inside time, time would later exist inside his will. Eternity was not endless duration, it was fullness without decay, presence without absence. There was no beginning because there was no need for one. God simply was, complete in himself, perfect in love, wisdom, and purpose. Creation did not begin because God was bored. It did not begin because he was lonely. It began because love desires expression. And so, in a moment that was not measured by seconds, God chose to speak. The first act of creation was not motion, matter, or energy, it was word. When God spoke, his voice did not describe reality, it commanded it. His speech carried authority that required no explanation and power that allowed no resistance. Let there be light. Light was not merely brightness. It was revelation. It was order pushing back against formlessness. It was clarity entering what had never known distinction. Light burst forth instantly, not flickering, not uncertain, not evolving, but complete. God separated light from darkness, not as enemies, but as boundaries. In doing so, he revealed a foundational truth of his nature: God is a God of distinction. He defines, names, and orders, not to limit, but to create harmony. Then the heavens were stretched out, vast, limitless, breathtaking. Space unfolded like a divine canvas, prepared to hold galaxies yet unborn. Stars waited in potential, flames suspended in obedience. God shaped the skies with precision so immense that humanity would later study them for thousands of years and still fail to grasp their full extent. Below, the waters gathered. Oceans formed at God's command, stopping exactly where he told them to stop. Shorelines became borders written by divine authority. Waves learned to rise and fall without rebellion. The earth emerged, solid and dependable, a foundation built not by chance, but by intentional design. Then God invited life to flourish. From the soil sprang vegetation in endless variety. Seeds carried instructions written into their very being. Trees stood tall, bearing fruit with flavor, color, and nourishment already perfected, before mouths existed to taste them. Flowers bloomed with extravagant beauty that served no survival function, revealing that God values beauty for its own sake. The seas filled with life that moved like living art. Creatures shimmered beneath the surface, forming ecosystems balanced in quiet cooperation. The sky filled with birds whose wings traced freedom through the air. The land welcomed animals of every kind, each shaped with care, each assigned a place. Nothing fought for dominance. Nothing killed to survive. Nothing feared extinction. Life existed without anxiety. This was God's perfect world, not fragile, not temporary, not accidental. It was a symphony of harmony, where every part played its role in perfect rhythm. Creation did not struggle to exist, it thrived naturally because it was aligned with its Creator, and after each act, God saw what He had made. It was good. Yet goodness alone was not God's ultimate goal. Because perfection without relationship is incomplete. God desired not only a world that functioned, but one that could be known. Not merely creatures that obeyed instinct, but beings who could respond in love. The stars could not choose Him. The oceans could not trust Him. The animals could not reflect His nature consciously. So God prepared something entirely new. Saw strength and gentleness, speed and patience, variety and beauty. And as He named them, He understood His own role. He was different. Every creature had a pair, a rhythm, an instinctual completeness. Adam alone stood as both part of creation and separate from it. He ruled not by domination, but by reflection. Authority did not flow from power, it flowed from likeness. Adam was made in the image of God. This image was not physical resemblance, but shared qualities, reason, creativity, moral awareness, the ability to choose love freely. Adam could think, imagine, plan, and decide. He could respond to God not as a programmed being, but as a willing one. And with that gift came freedom. God spoke to Adam clearly, not vaguely, not cryptically. You may freely eat from every tree of the garden. Freedom was Adam's starting point, not his reward. God placed him in abundance, not restriction. Eden was permission before it was command. But from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, you must not eat. This was not arbitrary. It was relational. The tree represented a boundary, not because knowledge was evil, but because wisdom detached from trust becomes dangerous. God was teaching Adam something profound. Good and evil were not concepts to be defined independently, they were realities rooted in relationship with God. And then came the consequence, not spoken as threat, but truth. For on the day you eat from it, you will surely die. Death was not introduced as punishment, it was described as outcome. Separation from the source of life would naturally produce loss of life. God was not withholding something good from Adam, He was protecting him from something destructive. Adam accepted the command without resistance. Obedience in Eden did not feel like sacrifice. There was no internal struggle, no suspicion, no desire for more, because Adam already had everything he needed. Trust was effortless in a world where God's presence was visible and constant. Yet God, who sees beyond moments into futures, observed something Adam himself had not yet named. Adam was alone. Not lonely, but incomplete. God declared, for the first time in all of creation, that something was not good. It is not good for man to be alone. This was not a flaw in Adam, it was a revelation of God's design. Relationship was not optional, it was essential. Adam reflected God, but he could not experience relational love fully without another who shared his nature. So God caused Adam to fall into a deep sleep. And from Adam's side, he formed another, equal in value, different in design, united in purpose. When Adam awoke and saw her, recognition surged again, this time mixed with joy. This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. For the first time, Adam experienced companionship. Not ownership. Not dominance. Unity. They stood together without shame, without fear, without separation. Love required no defense. Trust required no proof. And God walked with them. This was humanity's original state, not guilt-driven, not rule-bound, not broken. It was relational, open, secure. Adam lived not trying to become like God, he already reflected him. Yet within that perfect freedom rested the weight of choice. And soon, Adam would discover that love's greatest risk is not hatred, but doubt. He had made a world ready for relationship, trust, and choice. And soon, that choice would define everything. And so Adam lived in a world where nothing was broken. He woke each day not to urgency, but to peace. The earth responded to his touch without resistance. The air carried no threat. Work was not exhausting, it was meaningful. Every step he took reminded him that he belonged, that he was formed with intention and placed with care. Adam did not measure time by fear of tomorrow. He did not wonder whether he was enough. He did not struggle to prove his worth. His identity was settled before he ever acted, because it had been given to him by God himself. In the presence of his Creator, Adam was fully known, and fully safe. God walked with him, not as a distant ruler, but as a companion. Their communion required no ritual, no sacrifice, no mediation. It was simple, open, and unbroken. Adam listened, and God spoke. Adam trusted, and God delighted. The garden stood around them like a living promise, every tree an expression of generosity, every river a reminder of faithfulness. Nothing in Eden demanded haste. Nothing whispered fear. Nothing urged Adam to grasp what was already freely given. And yet, within all this abundance, God entrusted Adam with something greater than the garden itself. He entrusted him with freedom. Adam stood at the center of creation not as its owner, but as its steward. The world flourished because it was aligned with its Maker, and Adam flourished because he was aligned with God. Love did not need to prove itself. Obedience did not feel restrictive. Trust flowed naturally, like breath. For now, nothing pulled Adam away from God's presence. Nothing questioned God's goodness. Nothing distorted truth. This was the calm before history shifted. The quiet before temptation found a voice. The innocence before awareness. The harmony before fracture. Adam did not yet know how fragile freedom could be. He did not yet understand the cost of doubt. He stood in the fullness of what humanity was meant to be, whole, unashamed, deeply connected. And in that stillness, Eden held its breath. Because soon, a choice would be placed before humanity, not forced, not rushed, but offered. And everything that followed would begin here.